Meeting of the Abington School Committee for Tuesday, September 25th, 7 p.m. I'd like to start with saluting the flag. Pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Of the hearing of visitors, do we have any visitors that would like to speak?
Good evening, everyone. I'm here tonight on behalf of the members of the Abington Education Association to report the results of the AEA meetings which were conducted earlier this afternoon. By a vote of 104 to 3, members of the AEA have chosen to establish October 1st as a deadline for negotiations. If we are not settled at the negotiating session on that date, we will immediately move to implement Phase 4 of a work actions campaign. As a measure of good faith, we had opted to postpone moving to Phase 4 on August 29th as originally planned. However, since the school committee offered no movement in the last session, and because we are now 22 months into negotiations, we feel we are left with no other option. Upon the recommendation of the AEA crisis team, AEA members will continue to abstain from all voluntary activities, clubs, and committees. Phase 4 will begin with a vote of no confidence in the establishment of a Work to Rule campaign to begin the morning of October 2nd. Additional Phase 4 actions are yet to be determined and will be added as necessary. I know that I speak on behalf of all AEA members when I say that I truly hope that the school committee and administration arrive at our next session with the intent of moving forward in this process, and that after 22 months of bargaining, a fair and equitable settlement is long overdue. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you. I would like to say, we also would like to move to a fair and equitable settlement on this for all of it, all the people involved, the students especially. Is any other visitors? We're now going to move to the report for the Assistant Superintendent of Business and Finance, Felicia Michelle.
Thank you. I have a number of updates for you tonight. The first being the update on our feasibility study, MSBA. Since the last meeting, we have advertised for an owner's project manager to conduct to be engaged in the feasibility study with us. That was advertised in the Central Registry, which is a requirement of the state, for 2 weeks. It was also advertised locally in the Brockton Enterprise, and the proposals are due tomorrow at 3 o'clock. There's been a lot of interest. We had over 17 firms attend our on-site meeting last week. Once we have all of the proposals tomorrow afternoon, thank you, sort of. Once we have all the proposals tomorrow afternoon, the subcommittee from the school building committee will be meeting on Thursday to select 3 to 5 firms to then interview, and those interviews are tentatively scheduled for Tuesday, October 2nd in this room, tentatively to begin at 5:30. So hopefully by the end of next week, we will have an owner's project manager locally selected. We'll then negotiate a contract with the firm, and the final step would be the Mass School Building Authority approving our selection of an owner's project manager. After we select an owner's project manager, we then go with the owner's project manager and advertise for a designer/architect, and that process will take us into sometime in January before we have a designer architect on board.
What, Felicia, what is the time frame from the MSBA accepting our, the person,
Yep.
How long will that
Oh,
take?
there's a meeting that they meet once a month. So we're trying to get our owner's project manager in place for their November, I think it's 4th meeting, the first week in November meeting, and at that point they will approve our owner's project manager.
Communications Committee. Another subcommittee of the Town Building Committee for School is a communication subcommittee. We've been meeting And already Richard Testel, the chair of the committee, has presented at the youth opening for soccer in town. He's scheduling a cable show with the local access cable. And we are currently, through the town hall, with the assistance of the town manager, setting up a website that will hang all of the information that we're talking about in terms of the request for studies that Felicia's published for an OPM, the minutes of meetings, pictures of the work that's being done, and perhaps even the taping of the interviews for the OPM. So there'll be one website for people to access, and we plan on having it connect to the school website and the town website, because we want to get as much factual information out there to people as possible. It's just going to be a website with the facts about the process and what we're doing, so that there's transparency and people know what's going on. So that's in process.
Are there any other questions? The second item is an update on the Abington High School roof, which, as you are aware, on August 28th, we had a small leak in the PKS room at Abington High School. It was repaired quickly. We had little damage, a little bit of damage, but not significant damage. We believed that we had repaired what was leaking that night. On the night of September 4th, we had what I will call a significant roof leak in the PKS room. I would actually say that it was raining in the PKS room. At that point, we had a roofing company immediately come on site. We had an asbestos abatement company come on site because the ceiling in the PKS room has asbestos content in it, and we didn't know if we were going to lose portions of the ceiling or not. The next morning, after it stopped raining, the roof contractor was able to get up on the roof and make necessary repairs, immediate repairs. We then submitted to the state to have an emergency procurement of roofing services, which was approved. The roofing contractor then spent an entire day repairing the seams on the roof of the PKS room. We've had a few significant rainstorms since then. We've had no additional water penetration into that room, which is a very good sign. It doesn't mean that we don't, that in our capital planning, we shouldn't be looking at replacing the roof, but in the short term, we've been able to seal the seams that had let go at the time. That's something that I've learned a lot about roofs in the last few weeks. Our roof is what's called a rubber ballasted roof, and it has a layer of stones on top of it. So even in an inspection, you wouldn't see that the seams were starting to go because they're all covered with stones. So the stones had to be moved, and at that point you could see that some seams had let go. They were able to replace, like I said, they were able to replace the seams. The interior, however, we have been waiting for the insurance company to provide us with a number, if you will, for what they would cover in terms of a repair. There is asbestos content, like I said, in that ceiling. A piece of it did fall. Luckily, the asbestos abatement company happened to be on site, actually, when it fell. They were able to abate it quickly. We had the Department of Environmental Protection in. We did air tests. Everything in the room, as an extraordinary precaution, everything that was in the room was cleaned by the abatement company and returned. If there were instruments, returned to students. Chairs were removed, cleaned and removed. Last week,
You had wipe tests and air tests.
Correct. We had wipe tests and air tests, which was even above what the DEP required, but we felt it prudent and a responsible thing to do. Last week, the insurance company brought in an associate from a risk management company to help assess the cause of the roof failure. We are hoping for a report later this week from the insurance company in terms of what portions will be covered by insurance. So that's where we are right now. We were able to use, at last fall's town meeting, building envelope money was set aside for the school department to use. We were able to use that. We had some of that money remaining. We hadn't completed the projects, and we were able to use some of that money to do the roof repairs in the short term. And if the insurance company covers it, we'll obviously replace that money and do the other projects that we had anticipated.
Is the entire high school roof that same type of structure?
It is not. There's sections that were, that roof, the one over the music room, over PKS room, and over the E-wing are both of the same vintage. Those were both replaced in the mid-'80s. Other portions of the roof have been repaired and replaced since then.
Was a complete inspection done of the entire high school roof, or just that one area?
We haven't had a full, I wouldn't say a full inspection, if you will, but the roofing company was up there in the last couple weeks. And the two areas of greatest need are PKS and the E-wing. And those are of the same vintage, same type of roof.
So Felicia, what was the cost of the emergency repairs for after that second storm?
Right, of just the roof repairs.
Just the roofing.
Is about $18,000.
$18,000 out of that $18,000, how much was from the building envelope fund?
The entire amount.
Okay, so the entire amount for the roof was able to be contained in that
Yep.
money set aside.
Correct.
So we're not running at a negative at this point.
Correct.
And we're hoping to get an estimate for interior damage from the, did they give any indication of how things were looking? Were they giving any, or was it just a plain envelope where they didn't show us any cards?
They haven't particularly shown us any cards, and I'm waiting for Friday's report. I didn't like the fact necessarily that they brought in a consulting firm to try to determine the cause of the roof leak, but I think it's premature to act on that until we get their full report.
Now regarding the roof emergency repairs, talking with the roofing company, do they give any type of duration that we can anticipate to get out of that repairs without having any issues?
They're confident in the repairs that they did.
However, there are other issues with the seams that are up there, is that?
Not the seams. They've replaced all of the seams over the PKS room.
Okay.
But the roof is 30 years, almost 30 years old, and it is in need of replacement. It should be high on our capital repair list.
Just explain what kind of scenario we are in for the public, because if we go ahead and replace the roof and we get state funding, then if we come out with a finding that we're gonna go with a new building, then we owe the state that money back, so.
Correct.
Just, if people think we're moving a little slow, we gotta kind of tiptoe through this process to make sure that we're using the taxpayers' money and not wasting it.
Correct. There is a, thank you, Tom, in January, the MSBA will be opening their statements of interest again for repairs such as the green repair, but not green repair, but building envelope, boilers, those types of projects. If we were to apply for a roof at a reimbursement rate, and we then decided that we were either gonna build a high school, build a middle high school, do renovations to the high school that would somehow impact that roof, then we would, it's called a clawback, we'd have to pay back any reimbursement that they gave us on that project. So I think until we know what, we go through the feasibility study process and we know what is going to be recommended, then we would go forward with the larger
Yeah, the
repairs.
appropriate actions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, I assume the room is still not being used?
Correct. The room is not being used at this time. It's still, we still have tarps under the area that was leaking because we have had two significant rainstorms. We haven't had any leaks. And until that area is abated and sealed, we feel that it's not unsafe to go into it, but I wouldn't want to have classes in there, or students in there.
When do they think that the students will be able to use that again?
Well, we'll hopefully have the insurance report this week. At that point, depending on the recommendation from the insurance company, we're outside of the window of an emergency procurement, so we'd advertise for 2 weeks is the minimum amount to have the abatement work done. Then we would have to have the plastering work done as well. So we're still looking, I would say, a month out.
The time period by which that you're making sure that the roof repairs hold too are critical, because water leaking into that room would then cause a leak down into the cafeteria, which would mean we would lose that part of the building, and it would be a larger impact. Losing the only room in the Abington Public Schools where you can have large assemblies or functions other than a cafeteria space, which has a poor sound quality, hurts. Losing the high school cafeteria on top of that would hurt more.
Correct. And the teachers at the high school that use that area, I do have to thank them for being understanding and flexible, especially those first few days when we didn't know how long it would be, and there was equipment in there, and there was chairs and music stands, and the students as well have been very flexible with that.
This may be a time to do the capital plan piece that we're not aware that we were required, that we had a deadline for the capital plan submission for the town meeting until today, until Felicia called to town hall and asked.
In a conversation with the town hall.
In a conversation with the assistant town manager, and so.
Late this afternoon.
And so this is an add-on to the agenda, and at the end of this, we're going to ask if you would entertain a motion and consider a vote, with the understanding that if any of this changes, we'd ask you to have another meeting, and we could come back and amend it.
Correct. And we spoke about these, many of these they were all on the capital plan last year as well. So roof repair replacement at Abington High School with an estimate of $750,000. And that would be the areas, the E-wing, the PKS room, and as Mike had asked, an analysis of the rest of the roofing at the high school to determine what other areas would need to be repaired and or replaced. Woodsdale Elementary School, that would be the second. That is also rubber ballasted roof with the stones on top. We've done a number of repairs over the years. There's been some dry rotten areas along the edges that have been repaired. Anytime that there's any leak or a big rainstorm, then the maintenance department is on the roof evaluating what needs to be done and getting in the roofing contractor to do those types of repairs. North and Center, those would be the last of the roof repairs that I would recommend. And those again are, that would be a replacement of those. The Frollo Middle School Garaventa is, if you've been at the Frollo, the stairway closest to the gymnasium, there's that kind of extra tubing that goes up there. There's no elevator at the Frollo. It's the only way that somebody could get, that's in a wheelchair or otherwise can't go upstairs to get from the first floor, second floor to the third floor. It is very old. It is very, very difficult for us to get parts. It was approved in our last inspection, and we've been told that in 2014, it will not be approved as a elevator, if you will. So this is something that does need to be replaced and put into the town capital plan. If not for this fall, then it will have to be done for next fall. The univents at the center school, they work, but they're original to the building. There has been some
1936 or 7.
1936 or 7. There have been they've been retrofitted, they've been repaired, they've been they work, but they would be next on the list of those that would be replaced. And the last is the emergency generator replacement and associated switchgear at Abington High School. And we had a number of discussions around that last year as well. Abington High School is the emergency shelter for the town. The emergency generator is original to that building, and again, that gets inspected each year. We have had power outages, it has gone on, it has worked, it gets tested every year, but again, everything is original, and there are areas that, while they are repaired, are being recommended that we have that on the capital plan for replacement.
And the load capacity for that generator isn't such that it would be conducive to actually using it as a shelter. It keeps the refrigerators and the freezers going where we have all the food products for the Abington Public Schools, and it keeps minimal emergency lighting going.
And heat and lighting,
And heat.
but minimal,
Minimal.
not if there was a state of emergency and people needed to stay at the high school, it would be.
So by emergency lighting, we mean that it would be an environment by which you would have the lighting over the exits. But it really wouldn't be sufficient, let's say, if you had a large number of people in a gymnasium as a shelter or for whatever other type of purpose. So you'd get by with it in a minimal sort of capacity.
And these estimates are as of when?
The estimates are as of last year, and I've made a few adjustments based on my roof conversations, the roof repair conversations I've had over the last few weeks. I would, my recommendation would, if the committee would approve this, is to have these, if over the coming week, the information I get is very different, then we would, I would ask to reconvene the school committee to have another conversation around the capital plan. Again, and I don't like to give information at the last minute and not have good information. This came up at 4:30 this afternoon, and I wanted to be able to have a conversation about this tonight.
So this is for fiscal 13?
This is for a fall town meeting, which is scheduled for
October
October 29th.
And you're looking for $2 million?
Correct.
This would go on the entire
Town.
town capital plan.
Right.
So these are just our requests.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I'm just,
And then they, it goes on as a request, and then there's a number of meetings between now and October 29th. And I guess my feeling is these are the needs of our buildings right now. It doesn't mean that, obviously, they would all be funded this year, but that they would be in people's, that we'd be talking about it.
For example, this is the exact same list that was submitted last year, other than the masonry work
And the feasibilities.
and the feasibility study, and those two were chipped off, and these are what remain, and then obviously the high school roof has become a priority.
I don't have an issue with this being a preliminary list, but it needs to be contingent upon a bunch of stuff that's hanging out there right now, with the feasibility study and everything else.
Sure.
You know,
Sure.
That's still an awful lot of money.
The chairlift, does it work now?
It-
The Furlio?
It does work. It has,
It has to, right.
This is our wish list, though, we put out there every year, correct?
yep. And, sorry.
Well, considering the high school roof, that's really not a wish, isn't that a?
It is the wish list, but right now, the Garaventer is safety inspected, and it's inspected for functionality. But what we're told by the company that does these inspections is that in 2014, we will no longer be able to use it.
I understand
And so
that.
we want to raise our hand with the town now to say, this is coming in the pipeline, so that in 2014, there isn't a surprise that the school department had this need that we didn't tell them.
That Garaventa is very old. I'm surprised that it's still working, because I was teaching in the building when it was put in.
One of the reasons it won't be approved is because they'll no longer be able to get parts for it
Correct.
that are up to the standard and code by which that it's already functioning.
And I think also if we don't put our capital needs with our 6 buildings out there, that when things like the masonry project that had been on the capital plan for a few years, and we were able to do things along the way, and same thing with the Garaventa, that it has been an issue. We've been talking about it for 2 or 3 or 4 years. The roofs at the schools, we've known that, that they need to be repaired and replaced.
And the Woodsdale roof could be the next one that goes.
Yep.
And we want to be in a position where we've said, this is our priority, we want to make you aware of it, because that will eventually at the Woodsdale, if we don't do something, it's gonna, the situation at the high school is gonna happen there.
Well, if you bring them before town meeting, the town is going to vote on whether they give you the money or not. But if you don't have them on the list, then nobody knows that there's even a problem there.
Right.
So I think it needs to be there.
And this could change due to our whole MSBA situation.
Correct.
I'm speaking specifically about the high, you know.
The roofs and the.
No, I agree with Kathy. We need to get everything out there for the town to understand, to see. These are our big projects, not necessarily, and we are going to prioritize them. And like you said, over the next month and a half before it
Right.
goes to vote. But yeah, this is what we see as issues right now, a snapshot in time with the facilities that we have.
Right.
Depending upon what happens in the future, everything can change.
And not necessarily our expectation that at this fall town meeting, all of this would get funded. I mean,
No,
we're
absolutely.
not suggesting that. I would say on this list right now, the priority is the replacement of the Garaventa. Because if that doesn't happen this fall or next fall, then we're out of ADA compliance, and there could be big problems at the foot.
And to the good or to the bad, what you said is true about if we were to get an approved middle high school project, or middle school project, or high school project, or whatever it's going to be, there's the clawback that you described. And to the bad, we do have buildings, in the average, we can't apologize for the fact that the buildings are old. We've taken care of them, but they're old. And so they're just like your home. They need to be maintained.
Are we?
Motion to,
Motion
To approve as presented
approve as presented the capital plan.
for submission to the October 29th town meeting, the special town meeting.
So we're looking for a motion to approve the capital plan as presented for the town meeting in October? October 21? 29th.
Make the motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Thank you.
Thank you, Felicia.
Budget update. Felicia's going to provide you a memo that we're going to send out, freezing the budget for things that are what you would consider not of a critical operational need, is probably the best way to describe it. The highest need. Felicia, I'll let you read the.
Yeah, we have a number of categories. We're going to freeze the budget at this point, and there are expenditures that we will continue, orders that address emergency health and safety issues, orders that are essential to the continued operation of instructional programs, orders that were placed prior to the spending freeze, orders that are paid from alternative funding sources such as grants and gifts, and extraordinary requests that are approved by superintendent or either of the assistant superintendents. And this will go into effect tomorrow, immediately.
What, for example, if there's a professional development that somebody has to go to maintain adequate licensure to provide service to kids, we have to do it. There are other professional developments that are good to go to, then if they're not grant funded, we're not doing them. That's not to say they're not good to go to, but we can't afford to do them. We budgeted for this fiscal year close to, as close as possible, without any or much enablement for things to go wrong. One special education placement can cost $200,000. And we knew coming into this year that if we had, for example, an event like a special education placement that would cost $200,000, we could perhaps have to go to the town to say, we budgeted this tight, without any enablement to handle something like that, because that's what we were asked to do. And it's September, and we do have a multi-million-dollar budget, but once you factor in the amounts that you pay for salaries, the amounts that you pay for the current special education placements that you have, and we've already gotten less grant money in Title IIA than we had anticipated, you're worried. People look at the school department budget and say it's the biggest budget in town. Of course you have money. We don't, because the funds that are left after you account for those things that I've described is a small amount of money. And so we just want to be extra careful and responsible that if we get in a situation where we get a special education placement, for example, that does go the wrong way, that we've done everything possible to handle that before you go to the town and ask for additional funding to handle a problem that you have. For example, the roof. If that building envelope money wasn't there, we didn't budget to have a roof problem at the high school. And there's no cushion to handle those types of things. So,
It's actually 274 and 632, just for.
sorry, thank you. Those grants
Yeah,
are too.
Tom, it's not 2A. It's
I misspoke.
274. I'll talk about it
Okay,
later.
all right.
And then 632, where the negatives are.
Any questions on that? And there is a portion from grants, for example, like, as Peter said, that do need to be spent on such things as professional development or supplies, that have to be done. So, and those will continue. That's part of our, that you have to do to receive those grants.
For example, one of the problems we run into with this is, you'll see later in the agenda, I'm going to be asking you to accept the donation of iPads for the center school. So we're going to do this, then somebody donated the money for the iPads are going to come in, we're going to buy the iPads, and people are going to say, well, where'd you get that money? I thought you didn't have any money. So we just want to be clear with people and open, that's what's going on. So.
And my last item is just an update on something that we do annually, and that's the water testing in each of our schools. This year, we had, in each of the schools, 3 sites that are randomly tested for lead. They do what's called a first draw and a flush sample in each of those 3 randomly selected sites. In all of the sites, the flush draws came out within acceptable range. 2 of the first draws came out high for lead. One was at the North School in the maintenance area. The other was in the Beaver Brook kitchen area. So because it's high on the first draw and not high on the flush draw, all that means is that we then, every morning, are flushing out the faucets. So the custodian comes in, turns on the faucet, it runs for a certain, I think it's 3 minutes, it's recorded, it's dated every day, and the water's then safe, so.
And in actuality, this is something, and we do this public service announcement around this because this is something, to be quite honest, people should do in their homes. The difference between us and what's going on in your home is we actually test for it annually with a laboratory. We're required to do that because we're required to do it. We follow the letter of what we're required to do, and these elements are in the drinking water, and there's an acceptable level and there isn't an acceptable level, and so we follow that closely to make sure we're keeping kids safe, but also do the public awareness piece so that people know that they should be doing these things at home.
That's what I have. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Now we'll go to the reading and approval of our records, our minutes from our August 28th meeting. A motion to approve or amend the minutes of August 28th as presented. Everyone had a chance to look at them.
Motion to approve.
Mike has a motion. Second? Second. By Ellen.
Abstain.
All in favor of Tom abstaining. Unfinished business, we have none, correct?
Great.
Now we'll go to the report of Superintendent of School, Peter Schaefer.
Under Personnel Administration, I've approved the following technology liaisons for the 2012-2013 school year: Jason Scott, Joanne Capone, Laura Johnson, Andrea Doyen. The recommendation of Terry Sullivan, I've approved the appointment of Karen Witten, as a paraprofessional in the Abington Public Schools for this current school year. Under other matters, under the new collaborative requirements and regs from the state, the collaboratives that we're involved in will be giving quarterly reports. Kathy Bailey is your representative to North River Collaborative. I'll be bringing a Reads Collaborative update. That update that I provide from Reads will likely go under informational, and so that you have it in advance so you can ask me questions about it. But our involvement with Reads is really very limited, and our involvement in North River Collaborative is much more extensive, so Kathy is our rep.
Okay, I talked to Peter and I said I would give some information today. I know every now and then we hear from DIPNA that we're getting something through North River Collaborative or someone's coming in to do this. Actually, collaborative programs were set up so that communities could provide services for the needs of students that we don't see very often in our programs. And by coming together to do it, it keeps the cost down a little bit. You pay a membership, but then you pay less to have the children serviced. As a representative of the school committee at North River Collaborative, I've been quite impressed by the services that they provide. Being a retired teacher, I know I've always been in a system that sent kids to a collaborative. I'm impressed with what goes on at North River. They work to provide whatever services the communities find that they need, and they will work up programs to meet those needs. They have special education programs. They have a learning center for students with multiple disabilities, a learning center for students with autism and developmental disabilities, community-based vocational services. They have an alternative middle and high school. They have programs for the visually impaired, and recently they've started their Independence Academy, which is an alternative multi-service secondary school for adolescents with substance abuse or dependence problems. They also have other services, behavior consultants, therapists for occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, assistive technologies, which is wonderful and amazing because I've had students that have had to use those. English language learners, teachers. They have the North River Collaborative Family Network, which is actually housed at the North School. All of the programs that they have, because we are a member school, we can use their programs. It costs less than having to place them outside. Those schools that want to use those services that are not member schools can only use any available spaces after the member schools have used up the programs. And the member districts are Abington, Avon, Bridgewater, Raynham, East Bridgewater, Hanover, Rockland, West Bridgewater, and Whitman-Hanson. So each month I represent Abington at a meeting over at North River Collaborative. It's run very much the way a school committee meeting is run. Basically, the board for North River Collaborative is like the school committee. The biggest part of our meeting this month was spent on looking at the new evaluation system that's required by the DESE. We will be doing an evaluation of the director of North River Collaborative, much the way a superintendent is evaluated within the school system. It brought a good deal of discussion because it's a system that's going to take a lot of extra time and a lot of extra paperwork to accomplish. I know we've had some information about it at the school committee here because it will apply to Abington as well. You know, the drawback is that it's going to take a little extra time, which again, in any kind of school system, whether it's collaborative or a regional school system or a town school system. Time is money. The benefit to it is that it takes the subjectivity out of evaluating personnel. Personnel have to create their own goals through a self-assessment process. It's evaluated mid-year as well as the end of the year. Those people being evaluated have to provide evidence of what that they've done to achieve it, so that takes that subjectivity out of it. It's based on what's called SMART goals, which means that when someone sets a goal, that goal has to be specific and strategic. That's the S. It has to be measurable, which I think is where you're taking that subjectivity out of it. You have to be able to measure that there has been progress. The goals need to be action-oriented. They need to be rigorous yet realistic, and result-oriented. And a big component is the fact that it needs to be timed and tracked. So when evaluations take place, there's going to be evidence. And the goals are to bring people toward what needs to be done. So it's a needs-based assessment. So I think you're going to end up with much better information. We will over at North River Collaborative, and I think we will once there is an evaluation system based on this in town here too. But we also have to understand that it's also going to be a little more time intensive. I know a number of the representatives of the various towns were a bit concerned about the extra time that we were going to have to put in to accomplish it. But I think the results will be worthwhile. So anyway, because of the new regulations for collaboratives, the representatives from each of the towns are required quarterly to make a report to the school committee on what's happening within the collaborative.
Just for their district, so you would do a
Yes,
report
I would.
on our
I would do
schools.
it for I attend all of the meetings once a month.
Yep.
And then I would report out to our committee quarterly on what's happening with North River Collaborative. I don't know if anyone has any other questions on anything that.
Thank you for being our liaison over there.
No problem.
Thank you, Kathy.
Okay.
It's a lot of work, and that steering committee runs North River Collaborative. So, and that affects, the students in 8 different towns, so, thank you. The next item I have is, and Jamie, I haven't forgotten you. I'm gonna put you at the end of my section, okay? The acceptance of a donation of $20,668 from the Green Wave Boosters for the sub-varsity sports for the 2012-2013 school year. What I need to say about this is that it's unfortunate that we have to rely on our boosters who work so hard to help us fund the sports program in Abington. They are funding the sub-varsity, meaning junior varsity and freshman sports, because we don't have a way to pay for those programs. People look at the fees that they pay for kids to play sports through youth sports. If you're a parent, you know there are a lot of fees to play sports. I want you to imagine your costs being, if you're an organization like a high school, you're also providing transportation. Now, as a parent, you're providing transportation to your kids when they're playing youth sports in the community, but we're required to provide transportation, so there's more expense than just the referees, just the coaches, just the timekeepers, and all of the other things that go into it. There's transportation on top of that, so it's an expensive proposition, and we couldn't do this without their help. And so I want to say a couple things. I want to thank them for offering this donation. I'd like to ask you to accept it, and then also say that it would be wrong for us to continue that this is a relationship that the boosters should be expected to have with us forever. I'm hoping that we can get through tough budgets and then get back to our responsibility as a public school system for providing those things for our kids that you want your system to provide for the kids in your community, like a varsity, a junior varsity, and a freshman experience in sports. I think those are the things that are part of what good high schools do for their kids, and it's our responsibility to do. It's just that we don't have a way to do it without the assistance of the boosters at this point. So,
Do we have a list of the sub-varsity, junior varsity, and freshman sports that this donation actually covers?
I could probably name close to 95% of them off the top of my head. All the JV sports from the hockey to the football to the basketball, soccer, baseball, cross country, freshman is only football. Is there freshman basketball? Depends on, there's been both. One year we've had it for boys and girls, and then the year we had it just for boys. Depends on numbers.
And I think it's important to note that it's for both the boys and the girls' teams.
Boys and girls teams I
all
appreciate
of
you
them.
saying that. It's not for one sport in particular, but it's all sub-varsity sports, meaning the JV and the freshmen.
So,
We'd be asking for a motion to
accept
accept the donation of $20,668 from the Green Wave Boosters Association for sub-varsity sports for the 2012-2013 school year.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
on favor?
Yep.
With an extremely large thank you, I think,
Yeah.
is due to the boosters for continually supporting our children in times that we haven't been able to.
With a thank you note from the committee. Next item is the acceptance of the donation of 6 iPads for the Center Elementary School from the Center PTO. The applications for iPads and how they're used in classrooms, I'd love to be talking about a one-to-one computer initiative in Abington for all of our students. We need to start integrating the use of this type of technology in our classrooms. It'll be used with our students at the Center Elementary School. There are applications for those students at that age level, so they can be creative, and they serve a great and useful purpose in enriching their learning experience, and I'd ask for you to accept the donation.
Are they going to use those for all of the classes down there, the pre-K, the kindergarten? Do we know, or is it specifically for one age?
I don't know. They'll be used in the classrooms with the students. But if it's targeted at one specific group or not, I would, in past we've done is focused on the older groups, so that kindergarten, there's more available for them than the younger groups. I would assume that would be the use, but I couldn't tell you for certain.
And a lot of our specialists, such as your speech and language, for certain children that need it through special ed, use that as part of their embedded instructional practices, so I'm sure they'll also be utilizing it.
And also because it's gift,
Small enough building that they'll be able to.
and also because the gift is coming from the PTO, I'd hate for a preschool parent to feel like then, the preschoolers, if there's a reasonable application that they can use, they wouldn't have access to it, so. If you remember earlier in the year, we received a similar donation from a benefactor who's helped us annually for iPads and reading materials for this great age group, so.
So you already asked for a motion, correct?
Yes.
Make a motion, can I make a motion? Can I?
Sure, if, it's up to you. Motion to accept the donation of 6 iPads from the Center School PTO
I'll
as
make the
presented.
motion.
Second.
Seconded by Mike. All in favor? Ellen? Tom? Awesome. Thank you to the Center School PTO also.
We have the request for a field trip to Washington DC for the marching band on May 2nd. This is a trip that they take every year. Because it's out of state, by policy, we ask the committee to accept it from the music department. Concert band, marching band, and concert choir.
Is this high school, or is this?
High school.
The students that are at the Ferlio don't go on these trips,
No,
correct?
this is high school students.
And it's all 3 groups?
Yes.
Do we know approximately how many students? I was blank.
I know the ratio is 7 to 1.
1.
I don't know the number of
We
people
usually-
going.
Does it require 1 or 2 buses? Do you know? Usually for the trip?
Usually they decide that when they see what students sign up for it.
Historically, what is it? 1 bus usually? Or does it vary?
It varies.
I think last year for the trip, I'm pretty sure they had 2 buses. I could be wrong, but I have a feeling there were 2 buses for the trip last year. I think the chorus class actually got bigger this year, so I would think they would probably still have 2 buses this year.
Chaperones are usually parents of the students? Or
Teachers
too?
and parents.
It's a great trip. I did something similar in high school. Make the motion to approve it.
And, you know, just to build on what Tom said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt the motion, but students will experience a workshop performance opportunity with professional musicians. So, that's why they're going to New York.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Yep.
The next request is similar. It's for the grade 7 and 8 students to go to the Great East Festival in Salem, New Hampshire. This would be 50 students, potentially with a 10 to 1 ratio of students to chaperones. Again, it's an out-of-state trip. So although it's just over the border, we ask for your approval. It's still a different state.
It's just a day trip, though, correct?
It is a day trip.
Make a motion to approve the grade 7-8 band trip to the Grand East Festival in Salem, New Hampshire, May 24th, 2013, presented.
Second.
Ellen, all in favor?
Aye.
The next item I have for you is a presentation of my goals for the 11-12 school year, the previous school year. What we have, Kathy Bailey mentioned earlier about the new evaluation tool that we will be using. It's in process. I've already gone to a workshop on it. We are not one of the early adopters in the state, but we're required to put it into place. And it's going to take some time because there are a number of questions about it. For example, as Kathy mentioned, there's a mid-year and then an end-of-year report that's provided. One of the problems is that data like the MCAS test aren't available till the following year in September. And so that's something we need to somehow work out. But I'm working on that with my colleagues in other districts in terms of bringing information to you so we can come up with those goals for the coming year. This, what you have tonight, is the model that we've been working under, and I feel a responsibility to you to summarize and finish off the previous model with a summary based on the data that has been collected that measures what's been expected. Now, this is not as good as the SMART goals that we will develop going forward, I don't think, but it does, it did last year, and some of the members of the committee were here last year when we talked about measurements, and so I did try to ground all of this in measurable goals, even though we weren't at the point in Massachusetts where we had SMART goals. I promise I'm not going to read this entire document to you. But what I did try to do is go through what I submitted last year and then provide documentation of the measurements. And so if I could just hit the highlights for you, the process that we were working under, that we are working under currently, is that school committee members then provide feedback publicly to the chair, who, and that can be something that you write down, that you give to the chair, that could be provided to the public at the next meeting, or something you give tonight. And then after that, the chair summarizes and synthesizes the available information into a document that is given to me. And again, that takes place publicly. So, The evaluation of my performance as a superintendent of schools in accordance with the contract with the Abington School Committee, Appendix A, is based on addressing my goals and objectives which relate to my leadership, relationship with people, management and performance, and development of the total school program. The following describes a summary of my performance goals and objectives from the 2011-2012 school year. The specific objectives and measurements were designated to be aggressive and far-reaching. These performance goals and objectives were and remain essential and worthy ambitions. In financially sound economic times with ample resources, the following would have been considered a challenge. It is important to note that during these difficult economic times and the myriad of possible events beyond the control of the school department and the town of Abington have a potential negative impact on what follows. So my first goal was to provide educational leadership for the Abington Public School District in relation to federal, state mandates, district policy, and the school system's mission statement, guiding principles, and district-level goals. I won't read all the specific objectives to you, but I will try to focus on some of the measurements. For example, the creation of the Vision 2020 Action Plan, Strategic Plan and Action Planning documents. It was widely disseminated, and the action plans that followed will continue to be updated. 2 annual individual professional development meetings with all district administration occurred. Written evaluations were provided for each person at the end of the school year. 2 monthly central office administrative meetings and walkthroughs at different school buildings took place. The focus of our efforts has been the effective school leadership to improve student achievement, curriculum, professional development, planning to improve student achievement, and effective school management. Further on down under C, what we focused on was the measurement using the median student growth percentile. And this is something that's going to be difficult with the cycle that Massachusetts is looking for to accomplish, because this is based on student testing data. What I have for you in this document is the overall growth percentiles for Abington as measured by the MCAS test that we just received the results from, that are being mailed home to people as we speak over the next 24 to 48 hours. So the median student growth percentile, that's the district as a whole, was at 56 for mathematics and 49 for English percentage as measured by the MCAS test. The target goal for our pupils was 51% for both groups. The reason we used 51% as the target was because this median student growth percentile measures the growth that our students enjoyed or benefited from or had academically. So anything better than 50% is better than the average community in Abington in terms of level of achievement, in terms of growth toward that goal. That does not mean that the state average is where we want to be, but it uses the state average as a benchmark to measure our improvement compared to other systems. These are overall numbers. Then I broke them down for you by low income, special education, and there's a typo here. This, in the bullets that follow, say low income math, special education, 36% math. This should say low income in math is 55%, special education in math is 36%, minority status in math is 61%, low income in ELA, English Language Arts, is 47%, special education is 44% in ELA, and minority status in ELA is 68%. So those are the subgroups across the district. You will be getting a lot more information on MCAS testing in subsequent school committee meetings as it's broken down more specifically by grade, by topic, by school. And what we have learned from our accountability data is that we are considered in Massachusetts a level 2 district. Just to put this in a frame of reference, a level 2, there are 5 different levels for Massachusetts. Level 1 is the highest achieving district. Level 2 are where the majority of school systems are, and then level 3 is where you are targeted for some assistance in certain areas. Level 4, you're targeted for more assistance, and then level 5, you're getting down to those two, I believe it's one district in Massachusetts that's at level 5, and that's the lowest functioning system or descriptor of a system that Massachusetts has in terms of performance levels. So we are currently holding at level 2. If a subgroup in a school in your district is scores at level 2, your entire district is at level 2. So if we had a place where we were at level 3 in a subgroup in a schools in the system, then the entire system is designated at level 3. So again, more specific breakdowns are coming in the meetings that follow. These are overall numbers for the district as a whole, because we based my goals on those indicators, and so we try to provide a real measurement there. The second goal, cultivate a network of relationships within the school community which will promote open communication and enhance the school department's position with various constituent groups. 100% of my correspondence was met. I was religious about returning emails and phone calls and appointments with all individuals. All committee members, I believe, were well informed. Verifiable and documented local media reports were published. A lot more were provided than were published, but they did do some publishing. Meetings took place with staff. Third goal, to serve an instructional leader in the development, maintenance, and assessment of a well-planned and total school district program. The measurement in the area of curriculum documents were reviewed and updated. We need a lot more work in that area as we try to implement the Common Core. Thoughtful and comprehensive professional development plan was implemented and based on scientifically proven best practice strategies to improve student achievement. Students at the elementary through the secondary level had the opportunity to participate in free and grant-funded and fee-based after-school programming. The fourth goal, to determine the level demonstrate a level of management skill in a variety of task areas that will ensure the necessary conditions to improve a safe, aesthetically pleasing, appropriate learning environment. All of the recommendations from the Massachusetts Interlocal Insurance Association, that was the company that was providing our insurance, were appropriately addressed. For example, there are unforeseen circumstances. The Paul K. Smith room is that example. In a better budget climate, we'd have a ongoing cycle for roof repair and upkeep, and management, which is what we want to be doing. In what we've done, though, is several roofing projects around the district on an emergency basis to keep up with keeping the buildings going, because that's what's been available to us in Abington. Approved and funded construction and/or renovation items contained in the school committee capital plan were completed. We're fortunate we did the Woodsdale windows, and 56% of that was funded by the state. Laws, regulations, and policies, protocols were reviewed and followed. Documented multiple building, district, school, town, subcommittee, school committee, public meetings were held on the formulation and articulation of the FY12, FY13 budget. The fifth goal, I won't spend a lot of time on, to demonstrate administrative traits that will assist me in being effective in all aspects of my job as superintendent of schools. There are specific performance traits there. What's most important to me, I think, is the summary statement, and then listening to any questions or information you want to give me is actually most critical. But the summary statement is important to me because, I'll read it to you. Any success that I have had can be directly attributed to the work of the dedicated Abington Public School Department administrative team, faculty, and staff. I am fortunate to have also benefited from a school committee which is entirely and only invested in the success and the well-being of the town's children. These elements, coupled with the students and families who daily make me proud to serve them, have been crucial. I really do feel as though I work in a very special place with a group of dedicated people who are dedicated to the same cause, and that's improving the lives of kids. However, I need to make the following statement, and it's just the reality of the resources we have in Abington. In order to truly advance Abington forward, additional and sustainable resources must be found. The capacity of the school department has been limited only by the lack of adequate resources for education. We could do miracles in Abington if we had the average state funding in Massachusetts. As you're going to see by our achievement data in the coming months, we fluctuate above and below the state average in the #1 state in the nation for student achievement, and that's not where we want to be. With the professionals we have and the kids that we get from the families in Abington, we could do amazing things if we had the average amount of state funding. We are funded in the bottom percentage, the bottom 10%, the bottom 8% in Massachusetts, and that's just the fact. Other school systems spend, on average, about $5,000 per pupil more than we spend. Now, some of those are vocational schools that have higher budgets. Even if you just compare the public schools, the K through 12 systems that here in the South Shore area, they spend more on their students than we do. And it's hard for me to feel like I've been successful when we've got 30 students in a room at the elementary level. We need program at the middle school level. We need to add some AP classes at the high school. At the same time, and put additional programming at the high school. At the same time, we were able to get our high school accreditation back online. That was the administrative staff and the teachers at the high school and the hard work that they did. We were able to open a small, wonderful early elementary experience at the center school in a tough time. We're able to maintain tremendous numbers of students and manage them in a way that's safe for them at the Beaverbrook Elementary School. The Woodsdale School's achievement numbers, when you see them, were very impressive. And the Frollo Middle School, we've got a 2-year program to create a middle experience for kids that doesn't offer all the program we want to get them from an elementary age to a high school age. And they're well prepared. Because I know this because when our students, unfortunately, leave us and go to private school settings, they're well prepared for the private school settings. The colleges that accept our students do well. And so it's a mixed sort of message that I think we are sailing through a very difficult storm, and we're doing great work for the conditions we're working in, but I don't want anybody to think that we have what we need to do the job we want to do. So I'm open for any. It was a lot from me. I'm interested in what people have to say.
If people, as you said, that was a lot of information for tonight, but people can provide feedback to myself and we can present this to you in a public forum at our next meeting, right?
Yes. Anybody that wants to be superintendent of schools and want a public airing of all of their professional work, there's a line someplace. I invite you to apply. So, secondary summer school report, and I won't read this to you. I included, I just want to highlight a couple of things. There's no action required on this. We had 48 students start the program. 6 could not complete the program for one reason or another. The reasons are here. They're either attendance or disciplinary issues over the summer. 4 Abington High School students were actually able to receive their diploma upon completing the summer program, and the best day I had all summer was when Amy Lewis and Sarah Bowman, Janie Kelleher put together a graduation ceremony for them. Their parents came, and at first those students felt, I think, a little self-conscious about attending that, but it was really great that they were able to complete. They had a couple of credits they had to complete, and they were able to do that at the program. Even with the tuition losses, the program was operated with a fund balance beyond the operational cost of $1,543.50. It's hard to say that's extra money because, for example, all the photocopying, the phones, the lights, all those things really aren't figured into the operational cost, so that just goes into an account that's about $9,000 to be seed money to start next year's program. And so that will remain there. There is money that's left uncollected that we continue to try to collect from people. The director is requesting for next year, and I will meet with her before next year to hammer these things out, a stricter policy with regard to absences for medical reasons. Currently, we allow 2 absences. She's looking for 1 excused absence for medical reasons with a doctor's note. Looking for an online payment option. This is something I think we'll be able to provide for people. And that she's looking for some sort of stipend for the high school or the middle school administration that work quite a bit with her around the management of the program, because the life, health, safety and the responsibility of having all of those kids in a building requires some administrative experience, and she relied heavily on people around the district that are working during the summer, because there's a lot goes on here in the summer. Just wanted to, we'll address those concerns or those recommendations before next year begins. So, no questions? And I have some good news for you. The Abington CAM has been working with us, and that's the local access cable company, and we've been meeting with them for the last couple of months to talk about a program that they would fund at Abington High School. And so through their cable revenues, they have a budget, and they've approved the implementation of a program at Abington High School where we would hire a 2/5 person, hopefully the mid-year this year, to run an experience for our students that would have the scheduling opportunity later as we develop this program to opt into it as an elective, where they would be writing, directing, producing, doing all of the technical aspects, and editing for the publication of state-of-the-art multimedia productions for the cable channel. Last year, a group did a very nice piece about our girls soccer team, and we'd be looking for more things like that to be on the education channel, or other types of projects that people would take on. And so it would be for a 2/5 person for a half year, hopefully this year, and then for a 2/5 person for the following year, for the entire year. Not looking for any approval of any program tonight, because we're not ready to request that of you. It hasn't been fully developed yet, but sort of as an informational piece and to give you an opportunity to ask me any questions, I thought I should tell you that we were planning around this so that it wouldn't be a surprise to you. This funding would include the technology it takes to do this right. This funding would include the time it's going to take for somebody to write the curriculum and the assessments, so that we know that this is done right and done well. And only after those things are in place would we put the program in place. And there's really not much of a risk here of loss, because it's funded by the cable company. We would do those things right around with the curriculum, bring it to you first, put the technology in place. That would be in place first, and then the students would be able to do that for half a year. We would do that for the following years. We would have funding for it. That would be the only commitment. This is something that surrounding high schools have. This is something that if we were able to build a high school, middle high school, something like that, this is something we'd want in that program as we move forward. And so it's a nice opportunity to pilot this, and appreciate that Abington CAM is willing to, and their board is willing to work with us on this. So I wanted to open up for any questions you might have about it, and make sure that it wasn't a surprise when I bring it to you, and I look at it too. So hopefully for approval, if we can get this developed.
So they're going to be providing the funding and also, I would imagine, the equipment and supporting for that. Are they going to try to bring the equipment to the high school? I would assume that's where instead
Yes.
of having the students travel to, the Abington studio and stuff.
Yes, there
So
would.
that's the intention.
That's the intention. There could be potentially times, because the studio is actually not at the high school, we would have a smaller sort of satellite high school studio where the production, so a lot of the production could take place. That doesn't mean at one point or another, we might not need them to go over to the studio
Yeah.
to get a better understanding and a fuller understanding of what's involved in some of the work, though. That could occur.
And who's going to be writing the curriculum?
Great question. I don't know.
Okay.
The next question that would follow would be who would be running the program, and we'd have to hire that person.
Right.
So I don't know the answer to that either. This is really in the development stages. So I wanted to make you aware of it early on, rather than later.
Will Justin be involved at all in this process?
Justin Shanahan, I should thank Henry DeCarli and Justin. They've been involved in the planning. I know that they'll continue to be involved as needed. They've been wonderfully supportive, and so has the board at Abington Camp. But I'll bring all of those people and the appropriate thank you to you, in subsequent meetings.
Be a nice offering.
As an add-on, before Jamie, Abington Cam is asking, we found out today, for a member of this committee to be appointed as a member at Abington Cam in terms of their governing committee. So, I'm going to be asking the chair if they will appoint somebody, and I don't know if you're interested in asking somebody if they're interested or not.
Would anyone be interested in joining the Abington CAM?
I would be. I've worked with them before, so.
Bresky. I'd like to appoint Mike.
Thank you.
All in favor?
I think we're all going to sign
It's
that.
actually pretty fun, that
Thank you.
stuff. That can be enjoyable.
Great, thank
Okay,
you very much.
Thank you, Mike.
Before we do dates to remember, as another add-on, I apologize for these. There was a program at Abington High School provided by the Abington Education Foundation, which was tremendously successful, and I'm going to stop talking and turn it over to Jamie.
Great. So on September 5th, we at Abington High School were honored to have Chris Herron come and do a presentation for all the students. So the entire student body and all the faculty gathered in the gymnasium, and I think even some students from the Frollo came down and watched as well. For those of you who don't know, Chris Herron is a former basketball player. He grew up in Fall River and went to Durfee High School, and he was a tremendously talented basketball player. He was selected to go to Boston College and played basketball there, and then eventually he went to Fresno State, and he was eventually drafted into the NBA. And he even played for the Boston Celtics at one point. But what's really important about Chris Herron's story is that over a 15-year period, he abused drugs such as cocaine, heroin, OxyContin, and even crystal meth. And he talked to us about his long battle with drug addiction and how it started, and then how he would at times, feel like he was kicking the habit, and then how we would think, oh, the story is going to have a positive ending, here it comes, and then it would be another relapse. It was a very, very eye-opening and, heartbreaking presentation, because it was very sad, because at one point he was living the dream of every, high school basketball player from Massachusetts, and he was playing for the Boston Celtics, and then, his battle with drug addiction, kind of took that over. I believe he had overdosed at least 4 times, and it's really a miracle that he's even alive today. But he has recovered. I think he's been sober for about 4 years. And today he goes and speaks to, adolescents and teenagers and high school students about basically, why it's so important to abstain from drug and alcohol abuse. And I mean, it really starts, like he said, when he was in high school, he would, go to parties and he would drink and everything, and he didn't really think it was a big deal, but, those can really be gateways to doing harder drugs, in college and beyond. It was really, a lot of people had been saying right after the presentation that it was probably the best assembly they've ever, attended ever. And it was really, I mean, a lot of people were crying, a lot of people took it, to heart, and it was a really great presentation because, he was very relatable, and it wasn't like someone was just coming to our school and telling us, don't do drugs, live above the influence. It was someone who we could relate to his story, and he really, cared about all of us and didn't want us to ever, be forced to go down the same path that he did. And I think a lot of people can learn a lot from his story, and we were all, honored to have listened to him that day, and it was really great. So, we're really thankful for everyone who organized it, and I think a lot of people in the future should get to experience it as well.
Thank you, Jamie.
Oh, and also he has a ESPN documentary called Unguarded, and if you haven't seen it, I would definitely recommend watching it because it was really a great, film to watch.
It's part of the ESPN 30 for 30 series, correct?
We, Jamie, who is our student rep, was there, and, I found out somehow that she wanted to speak about this, and so I appreciate that she would be willing to do that. I think that's indicative of what I've heard about this, about how much impact that this presentation had on our high school and our 8th grade students, because our 8th grade went up, and we wouldn't have been able to have done this without the Abington Education Foundation, who, it was Peter Serino, one of our high school teachers, that called the AEF and said, how can we do this? This would be great, people want to do this, and the AEF found a way to do it for us, so I appreciate that they did that for us. Because people often say to me, I'm not new to administration, and the drug problems in America and the South Shore and kids dying of drug overdoses is not new. And people used to say to me, well, why aren't we educating our children so that they know, why are we sweeping this under the rug? Well, even when you've told the students that they could die, and that people do die, they still, unfortunately, involve themselves in the use of drugs, and we lose kids in Massachusetts to it. So you want to do those things that really hit home with our students, and this is one of those things. So you don't know what that one thing will be for the students, but you just keep trying everything you can, and hopefully something works. So, thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Mr. Remember?
It's to remember. We have Tuesday, October 2nd, Greenway Boosters meeting at the Abington High School at 6:30. Friday, October 5th, in-service early release for all grades. Monday, October 8th, Columbus Day, all school buildings and offices will be closed. Tuesday, October 9th, we have music parents meeting at the Abington High School, 7 p.m. And Tuesday, October 23rd, will be our next school committee meeting here at the Town Hall. Report of subcommittees?
Excuse me, I believe that most of those boosters meetings start at 7.
7?
Yes.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
The building use form said 6:30.
They
but
probably set up.
Just for the members,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Report of subcommittees?
Yes.
MASC Joint Conference on November 7th through 10th. Be asking the committee at the end of this to vote to send a delegate, and then an alternate for the MASC Joint Conference. This is a meeting that's going to take place, and in your packet you've got information on the professional development. This is offered by your professional organization, the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, and I would really recommend your involvement in anyone who's available going down and attending any one of these sessions. I provided what's going to be offered. This evaluative walkthrough piece in the use of technology is offered on Wednesday. If you look at, in terms of the panel sessions, school systems are going to be using technology. Administrators will be using technology on iPads to evaluate teachers as they do walkthroughs, planning strategically for an era of accountability, college and career readiness. There's a dinner where the commissioner will be speaking. School Law 101 is offered the following day. early adopters in the education evaluation system, ideas to improve your district's budget, and so on and so on. I won't read all of them to you, but you've got, I think, 4 pages of different professional development that are available to you. And then you've got a page on the resolutions, which, at our next meeting, I'm going to be asking you if you would vote, and so our delegate will be voting on your behalf at the assembly, will know the will of the committee. I've highlighted and outlined some things in here. I could answer any questions people have on them, or I could, we can go through them one by one at the next meeting. It's up to you.
Do we have, would anyone be interested in attending this conference, Kathy?
Yeah.
Look for a motion to appoint Kathy as our voting delegate, correct? Because we need, and she would be our voting delegate.
Yes.
Yes.
And we need to appoint an alternate.
An alternate, if Kathy can't make it, somebody else would be interested in casting your vote at the MASC conference.
I'll be in Arizona.
I actually have jury duty on the 8th.
I'm away then, too.
I had planned on going on Saturday, but but I'm not sure at this point if I could make the other dates. But I know I would be going on Saturday. That's the only time I could commit right now.
So, just, Kathy, just don't get sick.
Don't get sick. Go Friday.
Stay healthy.
We're looking at Resolution 5, that's a big one for us, the adequacy study.
Yes.
That's something that we really need to push for.
This is your group that will lobby the legislature to try to do these things. So,
I will try not to get sick.
if you want to just vote a delegate,
I am right now.
we can hope Kathy doesn't get sick, or if you want to vote an alternate.
Well, we can vote on the primary and then contingent on schedule, I guess.
Do you have to send 2 names? Is it required that you
No,
send
it doesn't,
2
we don't have to send 2 names, we can send one. The delegate assembly takes place at 3 o'clock on Friday. So, yeah, and you may just want to vote Kathy and not vote an alternate, I'm okay with that.
Does everyone feel comfortable with that? Just voting Kathy? Motion to, then I would like to make a motion to appoint Kathy Bailey as our voting delegate for the 2012 MASC Joint Conference. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Kathy.
And if throughout the week people have questions about these, and you can call me and ask me. MASC is a powerful organization in Massachusetts, and so really, if you want to spend some time on it, they are the group on behalf of school committees that does lobby our legislature for changes that we need. So,
It also provides you as committee members a lot of professional development. Well, especially Kathy being new to the board.
Different perspective.
Right.
Yeah, I've done their professional development day.
Good.
We have report of the Assistant Superintendent for Pupil Personnel Services, Dr. Thomas.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Just a couple of updates, actually quite a few. First is the 274 grant. Last time that I spoke with all of you, I gave you an update on all the grants that we have applied for, and we're still waiting on final approval from the state level. However, we remain optimistic that everything will come in. At the last meeting, I updated you that we were waiting and had been anticipating that 274 would be funded, the special ed program improvement, and that there was going to be a cut. So as you can see, previously in 2012, the funding was $23,686. This year it's $15,222, and so we're in the negative $8,464. However, we are happy that there is some funding in terms of 274. So that basically answers, our questions regarding the funding that we anticipate for this school year. Next is professional development, as you know, we send out our constant contacts, and we have in-service days that have been approved throughout the school year, and we have a variety of topics that are going on in every building across the district. And this past September 20th, we had baseline data collection that was taking place at Center School. I actually was there for most of it because I was then meeting with the special education staff at a certain time of that day. So I was able to sit in and listen to many of the staff members, as well as Dr. Rich, do presentations regarding looking at baseline data, starting at preschool and then at kindergarten and working its way up. And what does that look like? And it really links the whole connectivity to the educator evaluation model that we're going to be using. But most importantly, tracking how our students are doing at different times throughout the year, and then using that data to inform our instruction and then the services that we're providing for those children. So it was actually, really worthwhile time that we had with that group. The Beaver Brook Elementary School focused on the rating program, the curriculum templates on the network, and then determining types and pacing of writing assignments. I was not there, but we do have the two administrators in the room. However, I heard that it was well received from everyone, so that's always a plus. Did you want to mention anything since you're here, or all went well?
All went very well. The curriculum maps are just about done and ready to be put on the network.
Great.
A little bit sucks to do.
Perfect. All right, Woodsteel School focused also on the writing program and looking at the mathematics curriculum overview. So really it's about making sure everything's aligned with Common Core and our pacing pieces. And Frollo Champions with Destiny, their programming, as well as the common assessment development. So you're hearing, again, a lot of it is focused on data and assessments throughout the district. And then at Abington High School, I was also at that one. I was able to go that morning earlier to the high school and then go to Center, which was interesting, going from the big kids to the really little kids, and working with that staff. And at the high school, they were focused on grading practices and using data and looking at formative assessments versus summative assessments and linking that to their educator, what's coming in terms of not just using MCAS as the evaluation tool, but what are all the other types of assessments that you use to judge yourself in terms of our kids understanding what you're teaching and how well are they doing in terms of achievement, and then using that to inform instruction. So it was well received. And then I met with, at the high school and the Center School, special ed staff and touched base with them on a variety of focus areas. So Teresa's wonderful. It sends out our constant contact so the community members also know, our focus areas, because we want people to ask questions, know that we're using that time when their kids may be at home or elsewhere, that the staff is using that to continue to be, receive the professional development that they need in order to continue focusing in the areas that are state initiatives as well as district initiatives. So, any questions on that?
I do have to say that new addition of the constant contact, letting all parents know what everyone is doing
Right.
at each school, instead of just, oh, it's another half day. We just went back to school. That, that type of thing is
Right.
valid and, valuable information.
Good. The next is professional development, educator participation, and then North River Collaborative. I know that Kathy Bailey just spoke a little bit about that and everything that is offered through the collaborative, but I just wanted to update you regarding some of the professional development that our staff will be taking part in this year. And there's a variety of offerings, but like Kathy was saying, and we've talked about for years, is that because we are part of the collaborative, we do benefit from the professional development and all the services, but also it's at a cheaper rate. And so sometimes when we're involved in doing a lot of grant work with Joanne Haley-Sullivan and her team, that, we're fortunate that we're able to get some offerings free or at a low-level cost. So this year in particular, we have staff members that are attending Implementing the Massachusetts Model System for Educator Evaluation, and that's a big movement, as you know, in the state. Observing and Analyzing Teach in One, and that's all about, our administrators who will be trained in terms of evaluation supervision. SMART goals. You've heard Kathy talk a little bit about that. Supervision evaluation of special instructional support personnel. Unleashing the power of collaborative inquiry and professional development for data coaches. studying skillful teacher and using data day by day. And then we have dancing the dance and working together for successful inclusion and co-teaching for all students. So the majority, if not all, of that will be coming out of grant funding that we have built in from the state that I did talk about a little bit earlier. Also, just for informational purposes, the collaboratives also belong to SCRO, which is the Southeast Collaborative Regional Organization, so that you have Reeds and South Shore and SMEC, as well as North River and the South Coast Collaborative, that they also try to regionalize on professional development, so that they're offering particular focus areas for your staff members who might benefit from sports-related head injuries and concussions. So a lot of people, like in the areas of health or in nurses, et cetera, attend those trainings. The PASS, which is the Partnership for Advancement of School Service Providers, and that's looking at physical therapists and OTs, speech and language, so more focused services for those particular specialist areas. And our education, as well as ABA, which is the Applied Behavior Analysis that we've talked about before, and the discrete child teaching for our students who are autism and on the spectrum. And then working with students with visual impairments, as well as looking at support for the educational environment using the CERTs. So, and that's also focused on autism. So there's a lot of offerings across the region as well as locally. So we're able to benefit. And some of those are free, again, like I was saying, for some of our staff members because grants have been written. So it's a benefit for everybody. So any questions on that, just to give you a little feel for the professional development requirements and some of the things that our staff are engaging in. Okay, next you saw in your packet the letter regarding Dr. Green at Boston University. And I was part of a group this summer who met to talk about a grant that BU's writing regarding the development of social emotional assessment systems for junior high and high schools, and that's informing school-wide prevention and intervention planning. And basically, we're committing that we will work with BU, but you do have a fallback in terms of if by the time it is awarded the grant, then you can opt out. However, this is a really strong movement because the social emotional needs of our secondary level kids are growing at a very fast pace. And BU, this Dr. Green, she's great. She came out and did a whole presentation for us, and I've spoken with her quite a few times. You know, just looking at the South Shore, she's looking across the whole state, but she wants to have all areas included. And so for the South Shore, we have a variety of people who have signed on to really look at the needs of our students and then look at the assessment system that she's working on with people at BU in really looking at the specifics of assessing kids on the social emotional assessment system. So I'm excited about that, and I'm hoping that they are awarded the grant and that we'll be able to not only offer our staff trainings in the area, but also parents the opportunity to be engaged with BU, and then also our students. So as you read, you'll see that focus groups with students, teachers, parents, and school mental health service providers will be something that our community would be able to take part in. Phone interviews with students and parents, with people through BU, and then school-wide surveying using the newly developed SEAS, which goes back to the social emotional assessment system, which is being devised to really take a look closely at those social emotional needs of our middle and high school students.
Oh, is this a voluntary program if it is awarded?
Completely voluntary. And basically it would come from parents that would opt in, their students that would opt in to doing that. So we may have, you know, large numbers. The drawback to this is that BU, it's still, you have to go into the city on some of it. But Jennifer is really great about, she wants her teams to be able to travel because she knows that it's hard to have people, number one, go into the city, but number two, it's people are trying to get from one place to another and you're fitting an hour here and there, and so they're really trying to make it more accessible so they can work with a variety of families throughout the Commonwealth to really look at, what is going on and what type of services are being, given. And basically what's really scary is that because so many services are being cut, at the insurance level, that everything falls back to the schools because we have our kids for a certain number of hours and for a certain amount of days throughout a school year, and that education is being impacted when kids have severe social emotional issues, that it is negating their ability to really do make educational gains. And so BU is really jumping on board in terms of saying, we really need to highlight this, and then they'll be legislating, and working with groups in terms of moving this forward, and hopefully getting proper funding, not only through education, but also through other areas with insurance agencies, et cetera, and other linkages.
What's the time frame for this?
Basically, she's hoping that it's going to be funded, sooner than later. But as you know, with grants, it could take longer, and it always depends upon the funding mechanism. So we wrote this, and her hope is that she's going to hear within the next 6 months back in terms of where they're at, and then within a year in terms of how much money, and then moving forward in terms of the supports. So this actually works well for her because she's going on maternity leave any day. So she actually doesn't mind that it's going to take a little longer, because then she'll be back and be able to run this program. So it's really exciting. I think it's really a good move in the right direction for Abington, and then giving people more opportunity to learn more about that. Yeah. So I'll give you, more updates on that but right now, basically the most important piece is just getting our name and our school system, in with the group. And then I'll let you know in terms of the status as we move forward. Indicator 13 is the next, and that's about data collection. As you know, the State Department does a lot of data collection, a lot, in the area of special education. And so we're always submitting things to the department on a regular basis. And so the most recent one is our Indicator 13, which the State Department actually looks at all your IEPs, or they'll choose about 30 records to actually do a review on regarding students aged 14 to 21 on IEPs, and looking at their transition planning checklist. So it's really making sure that the student records, there's a reasonably cross-section of disabilities, ages, and special education placements for evidence of appropriate secondary transition planning. So we have students that are here with us in Abington High School. We have students that attend our vocational schools, so some of them will also be audited. And then we also have kids that are outplaced who are at that age between 14 and 21 that also will be audited. And basically it takes a look at, you have to go through the records review, and then you have to answer a variety of questions and ensure that the transition planning conversation is taking place at the IEP, and that people are preparing our students for the next stage of life in terms of whether they're moving into careers, moving into colleges, or the real piece about looking at participating agencies, so that for our students with special needs that perhaps need assistance through other agencies, that we have been working with their families in terms of providing them the services and the assistance that they need in those areas. So that's something that the high school has been primarily working on, and we do have one from the middle school that also is going to be checked.
Is that a yearly? Because I know we just came out of a hefty examination just a few months ago.
Yeah, this is, you're right, but it never stops in special ed. I say that and I laugh because I always think they're going to give us a reprieve, and then the next letter comes in the mail. And basically what it is that, the state's following the federal guidelines. So whatever the federal guidelines, receive for funding, and in terms of data collection, then it moves to the state level, and then the state needs to ask all your local levels to be able to supply all that information so that it can move its way all the way up through the chain. And so we've been doing indicators for years. So some are on an annual basis that you have to provide, some are on a every other. And so we're constantly updating and giving that information to the State Department. And then the corrective action pieces that come out of this. Say that we have one student, that a transition plan was, not at perfection, then we'll need to then take the next steps in terms of moving forward with the corrective action, similar to what we just did and continue to do for the CPR audit.
Who's responsible for compiling all of the information? Does that follow to the specific team, who is heading that IEP, or who is doing that?
It starts off at the school level, so the school level and the people who are chairing those meetings will be responsible for, they know the guidelines that they have to follow in terms of what needs to be discussed at every level throughout, pre-K all the way till children age out to 22. And then it's really about having administrators, because they sign off on everything, they're following through on the next level, making sure that everything's been adhered to at the building level, and then it moves to my office, where then we're checking to make sure. So there's a lot of different levels. Deb Keogh in my office does a lot of input for the state. In this particular case, Cheryl Culbert has been working closely in terms of looking at all of those record reviews and also supplying the information. So there are different hands in it at different times, but it starts at 14. So even though Cheryl's doing it at Abington High School, she may not have been a part of the writing process for certain ones, and so we work closely with Frolio as well in terms of making sure that everything is adhered to. Next is our corrective program, which is the corrective action pieces for the coordinated program review that you were just talking about, Tom. And I just wanted to update people that our information that we've already submitted has all been approved by the DESC, and Corey, who was our auditor in particular, she was the chair, has given us feedback that everything has passed thus far. The only remaining next piece is that for November, I will be doing a records review of 20 of our students to make sure that there's 100% compliance in all three areas of SE8, which is of the team meeting attendance, SE46 in terms of suspensions for kids that were suspended, and then making sure that all the procedures were followed in terms of everything after that suspension. And then CR, which was our Civil Rights 16, notice to students who have left school for one reason or another, making sure that there have been follow-ups that I've talked to you about. So that will be the last major corrective action until another 6 months after that, and then it'll be ongoing. So I just like to keep you up to speed on that, because there's a lot of, it's the data collection. And it's also good for us because it just keeps an eye on, on what's appropriate, and making sure that, because there's so much paperwork that flows through our office, you can easily miss a step. And even though it's all well-intentioned, it's nice to be able to have layers and lenses so that it starts at the building level and then works its way up. But there's an incredible amount of oversight from the State Department regarding special education. The next is special education PAC meeting. We had our PAC meeting on September 13th. We had one session at 1 o'clock during the day and another at 7 p.m. that night. And the focus area was presentation on the parents' rights and responsibilities in special education. So that's done by law. You have to have that meeting and review all of that yearly. And also all of that information goes out yearly from my office as well. So if people aren't able to attend the meeting, then they always have that brochure that's mailed by us. The discussion on stress busting the educational process, really focusing on, I've been working, and tomorrow I'll actually be doing some more work going to medical facilities and hospitals that I've told you about over the course of the years that I've been doing, and doing presentations so that we're doing a lot more linkages with our physicians and talking about laws for general education through special education, and how we can link the medical field and the educational field together. So I was chatting with our parents about that, and how to really try to engage more people especially on those high priority, really tough cases that we have, and trying to bring in the physicians to attend some of our meetings or even do conference calls with physicians so that they can have a broader understanding of, because many times parents are going in and it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, that they're in a doctor's visit, and yet we've been with the child for 180 days, for 6 hours a day, and being able to share what we're doing with the child, what types of interventions, what's working, what's not working, but also all the services that we do provide. So it's not automatically jumping to testing, but let's look first at, making sure that we're following the least restrictive environment and everything that goes with that. So we've been really getting a lot of feedback from the medical field, which has been very positive in terms of, and a lot of veterans from the medical field who don't mind calling and asking me a question because they have a lot of Abington students, and they'll say, we had a family come in, can you just remind me what you said on this particular, situation, what steps should I do? And whether it's the physicians or it's the nurse practitioners or whomever's in the office, again, it sends the message that we're all in this together, and that I don't know everything about your world and you don't know everything about my world, but we can communicate and collaborate on what's in the best interest of the child. So it's been well received, and again, once parents sign releases, we're able to have those open conversations.
How many members do we have on our staff?
It dwindles every year. So we only had 3 people. Yep.
And you offered the meeting during the day and in the evening to try to make it conducive to people's schedules.
And every year I change it up. Like last year I went to every building and, did PTO meetings and things of that sort. The nice thing about Abington and what I've found over the years is that it's small enough that they know where I am, so they can find me, they can call me, they can email me. When they want me, they know how to get me. But I also know that, people are busy. So it's nice that I did have a few come, but I also know that now being here, and I've been out to so many buildings over the course of the time, and we really did a push last year with the whole CPR audit because we were also being audited. So our auditors were calling homes, and they surveyed everybody. So it's interesting that on one hand, everybody, they're trusting us, that we're doing it, and I know that the ones that have their concerns, that they contact the building level administrators, or they're contacting one of us, and we're working through it. And in most cases, we can work through it. And then there are a few that go to different levels, but that's part of the process.
Interesting also to this, and it's sort of a tangent, is it back in that MASC, the ballot questions, one of the questions that MASC is asking of us, asking to lobby for would be to have insurance companies pick up the medical costs for kids. So not only are these doctors requiring us to do things in schools that we want to collaborate on, but also in our placements in terms of the medical needs of kids, then the bill for some of those things would be picked up by the insurance company. So that's in there, and just a tangent to this.
I think that's really important because I'll never forget 2 years ago having a real case such as that and speaking with the physician at length, and he had no idea that came at public taxpayers' expense, none. And this is a highly educated, cares about what he does, just like we care about what we do. And I think that when all of us are working together and understanding that, I think that, it is an expense for taxpayers. And so that if we could really look at the system, we know it's a broken system, but if we can look at the system in terms of the funding mechanism, I think that it's a win-win for everybody.
These are services that these children need, and we want them to get them. We just question the funding mechanism in terms of a public school funding these medical needs, and people don't realize that in our budget we have to provide for that. So.
And then other pieces that were discussed with professional development as well as special education programming. We're always looking at building programs within the district, but funding comes with that, and you also want to be able to have peers that actually are also grouped together. And, you know, so we talk, and the 3 parents that showed up were great, you know, in terms of, I didn't know 2 of them, and I knew one. She's been, you know, with us for a very, very long time. And so it's nice, you know, having those conversations and getting input. And even though 3 could only come, they're at baseball fields, football fields, you know, they have their friends, their neighborhood. So it's nice that they're able to ask questions and then go home and, you know, share that. So I think that it's a win-win for all of us. And then the last piece is status of the home education programs. As you know, I've been updating you and asking for motions to approve home education programs. I'm also doing that this evening. I have 2 more, 1 family, but 2 students, 1 in 10th grade, 1 in 6th grade, that are asking to homeschool their children, and so I will be asking for a motion to approve the recommended home education programs for that family. And so they've filled out all the proper paperwork, and then they supply us with the information throughout the school year. And we keep a close watch on this. I know that we talk about this all the time, but people say, you know, how closely do you monitor this? We monitor this as much as we can within legal limits, but in some cases, you know, you may have other agencies that are questioning if the child is really being educated, because they see them walking around or hanging out or doing whatever during the day, and they don't know what's going on. And so I do have people that do call, caseworkers that call from agencies saying, you know, what's going on with this case, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So I always go back to, you know, this is what was submitted, this is what the family said that they are doing, here are their credentials, here is the programming that they said that they would be providing, and then here's the type of assessments. And so once we have all that, then we have completed our obligation for homeschooling.
So we're looking, does anyone have any questions?
How many now do we have that are home educated in this town?
We have actually a couple more coming. I know that I've talked to a couple more parents. So we're getting close to probably 20 now. And, you know, in some cases, these go really well, and in some cases, they only do it for a year and they come back to the school. So we try to work closely, and the principals work closely, and administration in terms of providing supports. And then if we have students that are homeschooled that are also needing other services, whether it's due to a disability or what have you, then we also try to accommodate and make sure that they're aware of, you know, you can homeschool, but then you could also bring them in to receive a particular service for whatever is deemed necessary.
You said you are aware we have a few more coming, so obviously it's almost like an open enrollment.
It is.
An ongoing, rolling type of thing. That parents can choose for their child.
Correct.
We're looking for a motion to approve the additional home education program for the 2012-13 school year as recommended by Daphne Thomas. Mike?
Second.
All in favor?
Thank you.
Thank you. On to new business and the establishing our next school committee meeting, which is Tuesday, October 23rd at 7 p.m. And now we need a motion to approve all accounts as presented or amended. And then we're going to adjourn. Tom, make a motion?
Yep.
Second.
Kathy? Eva? I would need a motion to adjourn.
Under informational,
Oh.
just want to highlight just quickly, I've included the high school's AP scores and a private, private school summary of students applying to schools. I think the AP scores are, you want to do 3 or better for college credit. And you can see we've got a number of students that are performing at that level. Those scores are what we've seen in past years, and pretty good scores. And then the private, non-private, we always want them to be better, though. Private, non-private school summary, you can see that more and more students are opting to stay in the district. As we saw a dip in 2009 with the information that was provided about cuts that occurred in the district, and those cuts did occur. So that's just under information.
Move for adjournment for an executive session for purpose to discussing strategies, collective bargaining with the Abington Education Association, and not to return to public session. And the vote by roll call?
Sure.
Yeah, Kathy. Adjourned. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie, that was nice.
Okay.